Hello. Just got home about 15 minutes ago. So I'm stuffing my face now. Waiting for you all to come on here. There's one. Two. Now we're at 6. So, and before I start, my name is Jax West. I'm not related to the Avery family, since that's what I'm always asked. Not related, just a supporter. Today, I even titled this, Marni and Melissa Visit Discussion. So I know we're going to have people who will pop on here throughout the thing and go, what's new on the case? I'm here to talk about Marni and Melissa's visit today. And maybe we'll go into some Stephen stuff. That's rude of me to eat and talk with food in my mouth. So, I drove down to Marni and Melissa's. Marni and Melissa are in the same prison. It's about 2.5 hour drive for me. Oh, Trisha just had more surgery, so been having her watch. I hope you're doing all right. So it's about a 2.5 hour drive for me to Logan Correctional, where both girls are. When you get to that prison, you go into the first building. I have to put my first and last name, and then I need to put down the make and model of my car and license plate, and then I have to put the inmate's first and last name and their DOC number. And you have to then give them your license. Let's see. I think I still have the stuff in my back pocket. So I have to give them my license. And then I also have to give them, this is the card. God, the light. Okay, so you can kind of see it. So visitor card. So it's a plastic card like your debit card. And this is what then you bring cash that's going to go on this card. And there's a machine there, like a ATM machine type thing that you then put this card in. And so this card is, the cash gets loaded onto this card. And so then you put in what cash you want to use there. And then it remains on this card. And so I use this card then for both Marni and Melissa. So after you sign in, you then have to step to a next person at the desk where they're filling out. They want to look at my license and write my information about the license. They want to look at the food card because the food card has a number. There's a number written on each card. So they write down which card is mine. Then they want to know if I have anything in my hair, because they have to write that down. So they write down, one clip. Then if you have any jewelry on, I just do not wear any jewelry. And then they want to see if you have a belt on, what color your belt is, and then what kind of shoes and what color your shoes are. And they write all that down, as well as they take your car keys, and then your car keys get hung on a hook, and all the hooks are numbered. And so they write the number that your keys were hung on onto the sheet where they were looking at what's in my hair, jewelry, etc. Then you sit on this bench that's outside of this little mini room. And then I have to wait until there is a female officer available. So there's a time where they've literally made me sit there for an hour. Then I'm taken into that room. I just walk straight ahead into it. You're only taking 2 steps. You stop, so you're not facing the officer, and you put your arms out and put your legs apart, and you get frisked. Sometimes they ask me to take my shoes off. So while I'm standing there like this, I'll have to take one shoe off and then show her the bottom of that foot, and then take the other shoe off and show the bottom of that foot. Then once you're done there, you go and sit in another bench where you're waiting for an officer that will now take you to the visitor center. Once they come, we walk a little ways around the building. Then we walk into like this little guard shack thing where there's some officers sitting behind a desk that are hitting the button to unlock doors so we can go through. So you go in the one door, you take maybe 7 steps before you're going out the door. So you're back outside again. Then is the big fence. And so you have to wait for the officer that is escorting you to open it, as well as the people inside that little guard shack to buzz it so it'll unlock. And then from there, you walk through, which is really gorgeous. The inmates there that do the groundskeeping do a beautiful job. The flowers and everything, it's just beautiful. So you walk through there, you walk past one building, then you walk up some steps, and then you go into the visitor center building. The way this prison is that it's all these different buildings all over. And so then when you get into that visitor center, you report to the desk, and they ask, who are you here to see? They never care about a first name. They don't care what anybody's first name is. They just want their last name. And then they tell you what table you're assigned to sit at. And then you always have to sit where the inmate is facing that desk. They want eyes on that person. They don't want the inmate's back. So you sit on the other side of that table. And then you wait for your inmate to come to the room. And it could be, for Melissa, there's times that I've waited like an hour for Melissa because she was working and then she wants to shower, and so you're just sitting there, which is, you can't bring your cell phone in, so you're just stuck sitting there and can't do anything except stare around at other people. So that visitor center is a big rectangle shaped room. And so they fill up the visitor side all on the one side, all to the right side of the door first. And if there's a lot of people, then they'll start doing the other one. But there's vending machines on both sides, and they don't all have the same stuff. So then you go through the vending machines to get what food you want. You have to put this card in. It tells you what your balance is. And so then it's automatically deducting from this card. And stuff is like $6, $5. And then you don't get to leave when you want. You leave when they say the guards will say at different periods of time, there's a line going. And so that's when you leave, or you wait until the next one. But they do count, and also it's a shift change. So they will not let you out between 2 and 4 o'clock. So you need to either make sure you're out before then, or you're staying until afterwards. And so like today, they didn't call for a line until 4:30. So I left at 4:30 today. So when they say there's a line going, then you just now go line up there until the officer then walks you back through everything. Then once you get back to the, what do you want to call it? Receiving? I don't know. You have to find where you signed in. You have to put what time you're leaving, sign it, and then you also have to tell them the name of the inmate. They pull that sheet again, and now they want to check that I have a clip, that I have a belt, that I still have the same shoes on, all that kind of stuff. And when I visit Melissa and Marni same day, I have to walk all the way back, sign out, and then I have to sign right back in. I have to get frisked again and walked back. So I visited with Marni first. I always figure it's better to visit Marni first because Melissa works in the morning. She's a clerk for one of the cooks or whatever. So she's typically working in the morning, and Marni teaches, and she seems to teach more in the afternoon. So I figure that's the best way so when I got there today, visiting hours start at 9 a.m. I got there at like 9:15, but then it took in between waiting to get frisked and walked in and all that stuff. And then for Marni to get to the visitor's room, she probably didn't come in until 10. So I visited with Marni from 10 to 12:30, and then walk all the way back out and do all that. And so then Melissa came in. So I probably started my visit with Melissa at like 1:15. And then obviously now I'm stuck until after 4 because you have to leave by 2 for that shift change and count. So then visited with Melissa till 4:30. So Marni. I told Marni that I just received, and here I go showing this again. I just received the copy of her kid's book. Can you see that? My Mom Marni. That hopefully is going to be released on July 1st. So she wanted to know my opinions on the book, and so we talked about that for a while. We talked about some developments in her case, which it's so hard because in Marni's case, her story has never been told. So as we've talked about on here before, is if you Google Marni Yang, everything you find, she's so guilty. You know, if I was to just go off of that, I'd be the girl is guilty. And since they're waiting, they haven't filed yet. You don't want the state to know everything that you're preparing. So I can't tell you what they have to show why she's innocent. You just have to wait until that filing happens. And they really don't want to file until they for sure have all their ducks in a row. And then every time they think, so like they were supposed to be filing this week is when it was going to be, right? Yeah, it was going to be this week that they were filing. But then something else happens and you have to follow that lead. So I can't tell you, but she is innocent. And it's another case of crooked law enforcement. And that's, Melissa and Marni, their cases are both from the same county and involve some of the same corrupt people who frame people and do these horrible things. So one thing I discussed with Marni is I said when I did a live, was it yesterday that I did a live, and somebody asked me about writing Marni a letter, if there was an address so they could write to her. And now Marni has told me in the past that she's just not concerned with getting letters from people because she's so focused. She's either focused on her case or she's focused on her teaching, because she has really worked hard at educating the other inmates. And if she doesn't have class, she's also tutoring them. Then she's also taking her own classes, college courses and such. And now she just told me today she just took a job that she's working till midnight now, washing clothes. So she's busy. And previously she's just like, she doesn't know if she'd be able to write anybody back and all that. Now today she said that she thinks she's changed her mind on that, and that she would be okay with getting mail from people. But there is one, obviously she's not going to say anything about her case. So she's, don't ask her. She's not going to tell you. And she knows that there's people out there that support her and are concerned about her, and that, coming from MAM Gossip especially, that there are people that are interested in wanting to know her story. And so she really appreciates that. So she would be willing to start getting letters from people. She's very nervous about writing people back because she says there was an inmate there who somebody had written them, and the inmate wrote the person back. And then it turned out that I guess there is a website just for putting up inmates' letters. And so people sell their letters to that. And so then it costs that inmate $40 to get her letter removed from that website. And Marni is very private. And so it just mortifies her to think that, she'd be sharing her thoughts with somebody and then they're going to sell it and put it on the internet. And while there was Facebook and everything before she went to prison, she still just really can't comprehend how social media is like this huge thing, that people post every thought that they have. That makes her uncomfortable and weirded out by it all. She knows she'll, once she's free, that she would have to learn how to use social media and all that. But right now it just freaks her out. Because she says she's always been self-sufficient, a loner. She doesn't need to have a whole bunch of friends, and and she's okay with being alone and being in her own thoughts. And she keeps her circle small, the friends that she has that she knows she can trust. So she said, that she'd be willing to get letters. She's not sure about, how many people she would write back or all of that. But just like I tell you all with Steven, don't write to people just because you you want that letter back, and you're thinking that, this is this famous person, or, or infamous, and you just want a letter from them or whatever. Marni is happy to tell you about what her life is like in prison. She said she'd be, so if you want to ask her about, like, what is her daily schedule, what does she do, all that kind of stuff, that she'll talk about. She just won't talk about anything pertaining to her case. So at some point, I'll make a post with how you can write to Marni. Marni is, as I said yesterday, she is really, really smart. Oh, is she smart? And there's no bullshit with her. She's just going to say it how it is. So, some people might get turned off by that she's not phony. She's not going to kiss anybody's ass. And, but I get that, because, one of my nicknames has been Jax the Abrasive. I know I'm abrasive. I know I can be a major bitch. So that doesn't affect me. I don't want somebody that's phony. So Marni will ask me questions on, like, when I sat in for the 2 days with her legal team and all the experts on her case and seeing it all laid out. She wants me to find the holes. What's missing? What's wrong? She will say to me, why am I guilty? Tell me why I'm guilty. She's just matter of fact, so you're not going to get a whole bunch of fluff and bullshit. So I visited both her and Melissa, and they've both been in prison over 10 years. And so a lot of the stuff they say is similar, where they're both, how do I word this? Well, they stay all positive. They're ready to get out. It's, they're both like, enough is enough. I want to go. So they keep trying to stay positive on all this, but then when you get these extensions and all that, it's just like, so then they want to be hopeful and excited, but then you still have to protect yourself because it's so crushing. Like, Marni, we were going to be filing this week. Melissa, they were supposed to be filing a month ago, and now Melissa's filing is July 10th. Now, in talking with Melissa, it's July 10th is, right around the corner. But it's still just, she's ready to go. She wants to go. And, that's hard. Melissa is trying to keep herself very busy, so she works, as I said, and then she's really, really close with her bunkie, her cellie, and I think they've roomed together for 2 years, and so Melissa will help her with her job. And now Melissa is big into dreams, so once she asked me to get her a book on figuring out what your dreams mean. And so she's a big believer on her dreams will predict things to her. And so she's been having dreams of being out. And then her cellie will now, has been saying that, oh, Melissa's going to be leaving and I don't know what I'm going to do without you, and tearing up. And then Melissa's tearing up. And then Melissa's like, let's not talk, because you don't know if or when this is going to happen. And Melissa knows that it's going to be very sad to leave her Sally. They call each other sisters. And, so that's the one person she knows has her back in there. And both Melissa and Marni talk about that they try to stay out of the drama in the prison. They don't want to hear any of the drama that's going on. They want no part of it. So they work and then stay in their room and watch TV. Melissa today went through she told me what she watches every day of the week. Something both of them talked to me about was in the news recently, that there was this married couple. They had only been married for 10 days, and they were at Busch Stadium in St. Louis to see the St. Louis play the Chicago Cubs. Both of them were corrections officers at Marni and Melissa's prison. And they got into a fight, an argument, and they were at the parking garage 8 stories up, and the guy shoved her off the parking garage. And while they had been fighting, while they were arguing, the woman had hit record on her phone. So he then shoves her off that. She dies, and it's recorded. So when I was near the prison, when I get off the highway and I'm going to turn the way to the prison, because, this is all farmland and everything. So the one sign that's saying the prison is this way, there was a ribbon on it that had never been there before. And I didn't know what it was for. It's just like, oh, there's that ribbon. And then when I was sitting in the receiving area or whatever, now I see there's this big plaque that says the woman's name on it, and RIP and all this that was up there with her name. And June 2nd is the day that her husband murdered her. So both Melissa and Marni, brought it up on, that's the big thing that's been going on there. I guess the funeral was Saturday, and they did have a memorial at the prison that they allowed the inmates to attend. And that also they had a whole lot of sub officers in there, and was really light on officers because they allowed all the officers to go to her service. And so the things that Melissa and Marni told me is the guy was a prick. Both of them did not like this guy at all. That this guy had incidents all the time with the female inmates, where, like, they told me of an incident where the guy was in a woman's face, screaming in her face. He's got a record, a violent record. He's on parole himself, yet he's a corrections officer. What I was told is that he came from a rich family, and that what constantly got him out of anything. And both girls are really upset that he murdered his wife. He's not in jail. But he was able to bond out or whatever, so he's out, and they're only going to charge him with what is it called? Third, blah, blah, blah. So he's not even getting charged with murder, 3rd degree something or another. So, so if he's even found guilty, like, nothing barely anything's going to happen to this guy. And the girl literally taped it. And they said you can hear in the recording, you hear him punching her in the face and her screaming at him to stop punching her in the face. And the reason for the fight is the guy got drunk and she took the keys and wasn't allowing him to drive. So that's what he was pissed off about, wanting the keys to his car. So he was punching her in the face. She's saying, don't hit me. And then you hear her fall. You hear her screaming as she falls, and you hear the thud. Her phone fell and was still on the ground on the 8th floor of the parking garage. You then hear the guy go to his vehicle. He drives down there where his wife's body is now laying there. Then he straddled her, was like sitting on top of her, and then pretended to be trying to give her CPR. And when people arrived on the scene, he said there was a hit and run. A car ran her over. And then the police found her phone that recorded the whole thing. And he's only getting a 3rd degree something or another, who had multiple offenses, been in jail, was on parole, but he's a corrections officer. And he was like a lieutenant or something too, at a female prison. And he's violent towards women. And so, like I said, both girls said he was an asshole, didn't like him at all. And they both said that the girl was the sweetest, funniest thing. And Melissa said she treated us, I think it was Melissa who said, it doesn't matter which one, I guess. She treated us like a person. So it's shaken up some of the inmates, and it's shaken up officers too, that they said that some officers have been taking time off to try and deal with it, because it's this horrible thing. Let's see what else from the visit today. Melissa is anxious about July 10th coming up. She says she's heard that a whole lot of inmates from her prison have been filing this writ of habeas corpus, that have been doing the same thing. She said something about that there was a new law recently or whatever, and she thinks that's why. I haven't been following that stuff, and I really should. So I'll have to look into all of that. Marni talked about how, I guess there was something about a parole bill, and that there was a rally / protest down, Springfield is our capital here in Illinois. So there was a rally in Springfield, and it did like nothing. It had only like 30 people showed up to it. And so it was a big disappointment. And Marni would like to see criminal justice reform and some pressure be put on our legislators and such. And I told her, it's funny she says that, because I was just discussing yesterday with the moderators here about doing something for the wrongfully convicted. You know, I'm an activist. I've organized so many different rallies and protests and marches and this and that, but I haven't done anything for the wrongfully convicted, other than organizing the first Manitowoc rally. That, let's not go there. So I think I'm going to put something together. I had posted something yesterday on my personal Facebook, because I've got, a lot of activists friends on Facebook friends. And so asking if anybody would want to help organize it. And so somebody's already put me in contact with a guy. I haven't looked at his story, but he served 20 years for a crime he didn't do and is out, and I guess very active. And so she said I should talk to him. And so he has passed on his cell number to me, wanting me to call him to discuss things with. But obviously I was at, driving and at the prison, and 7:30 now. So I don't know when I'll talk to him, but I'm going to put something together. I don't know if I'm going to do a rally. It's really easy to organize a rally in Chicago because there's a certain place you have it at, the Federal Plaza, because that's public property. So you do not need a permit. You do not have to have police there, that you're paying for that and all that. So I don't know if I'm going to do a rally or if I would rather do a town hall type thing where then I have like this man who served 20 years be on the panel, and I could have Paul Kaluzinski or Marni's dad, and I could, get a lawyer and a doctor and, that. So make a panel and have it be more of a speaking thing, and then would sell tickets for like $25 a ticket. And then that money would go to the Justice Review to try and help people who can't afford experts to investigate their case. But yeah, so I thought it was interesting that Marni was talking about, because Marni's like, maybe get something, in Springfield. And I'm like, you can't do that right now, because the way our legislature works here in Illinois is May 31st. Is it May 30th or May 31st, the last day in May? Again, it's a number thing, and I don't do numbers. That was their last day of session. And so now our state senators and state representatives don't report back to Springfield until October. So you can't go to Springfield and do something like that. All of our people are now supposed to be home in their districts doing things with their constituents, where they're holding all these different town halls on all the different issues. But I'm like, I could have a state rep. I would invite our governor and our lieutenant governor and that type of thing. So, but I haven't thought much on it. Okay, I've been talking for a half hour and I haven't scrolled through any of your stuff. So let me go through on what you've said. Oh, your kid had surgery, not you, Trisha. Oh, that's worse. Hello, Samantha and Carol Ann and Cindy and Deborah and Matt and Janet and Samantha, Miley, Julie. Julie says, I love that post about the emails today. Very informative. Great read. And I think depending on how long it takes me to get through the stuff here, well, and there's only 17 people on, but I was thinking of doing a live, or in this live, could discuss those. Natasha, how do you get a job as a CO with a record? According to them, it's your family's rich. Third degree manslaughter. I don't even know if it was manslaughter. I don't know. I know I've seen the article because, with it being local, it's popped up in my news feed, but I didn't really read it. So I don't know. But yeah, it's a horrible story. Natasha says, was that on 2020 or something? I remember something like that on one of those crime shows. Well, it just happened a couple weeks ago. So I don't know. And I haven't seen it on 2020. I don't know why. I don't know what dog was whining. Kitty says, I heard about that case. I knew he wasn't going to get charged like a regular person. Julie says, is there a way to show Melissa a video of when the monarchs in your yard start emerging? Well, Julie, Melissa and I talked about monarchs for a while today. I told her about how I now have 10 caterpillars. And so I told her I can't show her a video. Well, I guess I could if I've registered to do she can do those video visits, but she's never done one before. But I told her I would take pictures and send her the pictures. But Melissa loves monarchs. It's by far her favorite butterfly. And her Sully is from Mexico. Monarchs are from Mexico. And, so her and her Sully love monarchs together. So we talked for a while about monarch butterflies too. Christy says, I am down for helping to organize. We can talk and chat later. All right, Christy. Hello, Shelly. Oh, Christy's got there you go. See, Christy's always on top of that. So there's the article on, oh my God, it's horrible. Julie says, what y'all think about filmmakers of convicting a murderer interviewing people at the rally? Well, from what I've heard, Julie, is that then it was denied that that's who Richard talked to there, but that Richard's first video, he even said that's who it was he talked to. I totally understand them being there, and I think they're going to rip on the people that show up there. I think it's just going to look horrible. So, and I don't know. I probably would have talked to him. In my activism and protesting, I do a lot of in-your-face stuff. So you're always told not to do that because the people that I deal with, they're videoing you. They wear a body camera and they're videoing you, and then they edit it and change it and make you look bad. So you're told you should never engage with them. So that's probably the best advice you could be told for talking to convicting a murderer people, because you don't know what they're going to do with that footage. But I'm also a bitch. So sometimes I want to fight. Not physically. Okay, I'm 47 years old. We're not getting into a physical fight. But sometimes arguing is fun, especially when you're arguing with dumb people. I do not blame convicting a murderer for being there. I do not blame Richard for talking to them, but Richard's an idiot and is no mental match for them, and he says the dumbest things. Okay, I've known the guy since before he was Eric O's or whatever that weird word is that he calls himself. He's a total dork. And now he's thinking he's a somebody because people follow his YouTube thing. And he does this, oh, we're going to protect Barb. Well, then you're not a supporter of Stephen and Brendan. And I went through all this yesterday on a rant. So let's not revisit that because I'll keep going and going and going. Earl, thank you. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except February that has 28. Learned that up teen years ago, but has helped all my life. Christy says it's 3rd-degree domestic assault. Could change to homicide, charges after autopsy. Okay. Julie said, he told me it was them on Twitter today. I just think it could become a problem. Yeah, it could. Julie, I prefer to argue naked. So to come back to Melissa and Marni, they're both doing well. They're both anxious, and they're both ready to go home. They're, they want to go. Melissa talked to me about, she's been picturing how she would want to decorate her home. The colors and things so that's always good, to get them out of talking about their case. That's what I tell you guys, when you write people. So, talk to her about, how would she set up her living room? Or she cooks a lot. She told me today that she doesn't eat at the chow hall. She lives off of the food she buys in commissary because she doesn't like the food that they serve there. That she just doesn't like it. So she'll get really creative with the stuff she's able to buy in commissary. And so, like, a thing that she raves about is her green beans. That these green beans that she makes, and with, like, she's told me before about them too. Like, she puts in pickle juice and all this, because you're just, and she thinks these green beans are the best thing ever. And now her dad cooks a lot and bakes. Melissa doesn't bake. She doesn't like to bake. She doesn't know anything about baking. Paul cooks and bakes. So I told her and her dad need to each prepare their green beans and have a cook-off, and then Melissa really wants to make these jalapeno poppers wrapped in bacon. So if you were to write to Melissa, you could talk to her about how does she want to do her house, talk to her about cooking, butterflies, loves butterflies. She draws so well. I mean, we've shown before, I'm sure you can find it on Melissa's Facebook page. Like, she drew a picture of her parents and gave it to them for their anniversary last year. Or, she's really good. So she really likes magazines that have butterflies in it, because that's the thing she likes to draw the most. So you could talk to her about butterflies. You can talk to her about, she loves horror movies and the whole haunted houses and all that. She was so excited that Fear the Walking Dead just came back because she's able to watch that. And then she just got set shows that she watches every night. She's looking forward to Monday. The Hills comes back on MTV, which, yes, I watched that too when it was out, and I'll be watching it when it comes back. So she'll be watching The Hills, and she likes Jersey Shore. And so she's the one that told me that they were going to be having the Situations wedding special episode or something like that is coming up. So you could, so all those various things you could talk to her about. Marni, one of her big passions is scuba diving. So if you know anything about scuba, she would just love to hear what is new in scuba world in the 10 years that she's been incarcerated, because that's something I talked with her about last time of, can you imagine how technology has changed for that, and what new gadgets or whatever there is for diving. So, so if you know anything about diving or whatever, that's something you could discuss with Marni. Marni loves to learn. And so she would just soak that up like a sponge if you could talk to her about scuba diving. Let me scroll and see if there's anything else. Julie says, except for leap year, my cousin was born on a leap day. And yes, they have cable. So they have TVs in their rooms and can watch what they want. You know, they don't have HBO, you know, the paid things. Marni doesn't really watch TV. She said today she turns on Good Morning America in the morning, but just to watch the banner on the bottom to give all the headlines. And so she's like, so once it's gone through that once, she's like, all right, I'm caught up on the news for the day, and then goes about her business. You know, Marni's not that interested in watching TV. Melissa enjoys a whole bunch of different shows. Like I said, she went through every day of the week what she watches, if she could stay awake, because they get up so early at the prison too. So, you know, she'll fall asleep at 8:00, you know. So she's planning on this weekend that since the Hills is coming back, she knows they'll have a marathon of all the past seasons. So she's hoping to like get lost in the old Hills episodes. So, okay, there's nothing else here. And there's 22 people on. Do we want to go over those emails in Stephen's case, or just call it a day and just leave this on my visit with Melissa and Marni for today? Melissa's got a Facebook group called Justice for Melissa Kaluzinski that is run by, or this one, Official Justice for Melissa Kaluzinski family page. Her aunt runs that and keeps that very up to date. So you can go there. Earl, I can craft a butterfly light. If I make one, could you take it into the prison? No, but it's something that could go to her parents' house and wait for her for when she's free. Yes, I can watch The Walking Dead. Christy wants to go over the emails. Let me find the emails. Oh God, here they are. All right, let me scroll down. Chris, not just me, others do too. What emails? So again, Reddit. If you have never been to Reddit, that's a rabbit hole that you can fall down, that they have people there that look into things. Here's the link for where I'm about to go and read, unless Christy's already beat me to it. So this was posted on Reddit last night. So I'll just read what it says. Emails sent to Zellner from Assistant Attorney General Fallon demonstrate the Wisconsin Department of Justice has been engaging in bad faith negotiations with Zellner in regards to her request to be granted access to bone evidence recovered from the Manitowoc County Quarry. Emails sent to, that's the same thing over again. I don't know why it says the same thing twice. First off, I'm going to provide a bit of context so everyone can understand why Fallon's emails to Zellner are indicative of bad faith negotiating. When we get to the emails, I've decided to just use screenshots. As some of the emails are multiple pages, links to the full PDF emails will be included at the end of the post. Please enjoy. Reviewing the state's violation of evidence retention laws and subsequent failed attempt to prevent their violation from being exposed. We are currently waiting on a decision and order regarding Zellner's latest motion filed with the Circuit Court. This motion contains claims relating to the state's destruction of biological evidence, the unidentified human bone fragments found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. These human bone fragments from the quarry, along with the suspected human pelvic fragments from the quarry, were all given to the Halbach family in 2011, even though at trial in 2007, Sweaty Sweat Sweat argued said bones could not belong to Teresa. During the trial, Kratz argued Teresa's burnt remains were confined to Avery's burn pit and the Dassey burn barrel. Kratz admonished the defense for suggesting the suspected human pelvis from the quarry belonged to Teresa because no one knew if was even human. The jury didn't know because they weren't told about the additional piles of human bone fragments found in Manitowoc County quarry. The jury only knew about a single debris pile off the Avery property, the one with the suspected human pelvis that Kratz himself told the jury was not evidence in the case. Glasses time since I'm reading. Note that quite a few of the human bone fragments from those additional quarry piles had cut marks on them. Kratz never argued Avery cut Teresa up or that he spread her burnt remains around multiple locations in the county quarry. Instead, Kratz decided to conceal from the jury the fact that many of the quarry bones were identified as human because of his theory of Teresa's murder did not account for the presence of those bones. Zellner argues by giving the quarry bones to the Halbach family, the state has implicitly admitted they believe, contrary to the representations made by Kratz to the jury, that said bones belong to Teresa. I agree. By returning those bones to the family, the state has directly acknowledged the possibility that Avery was convicted via the use of a false narrative of the crime, which might explain the state's ongoing attempt to prevent their actions from being exposed to Avery's counsel, failing to notify Avery, withholding reports for years on end, lying about the status of evidence. Zellner summarized this latest motion of hers by saying on page 6, quote, in 2007, the state misrepresented to the jury known facts and concealed evidence. In 2011, the state acted in bad faith when it violated Wisconsin and federal law by returning human bones to the Halbach family. In 2018, the state continued its pattern of concealment with the appellate court until it was caught. Mr. Avery is entitled to have his conviction reversed and granted a new trial, unquote. Now, with that summary out of the way, let's jump back in time a bit to September 2011 and work our way back into the present. The withheld 2011 CASO report reveals AAG Fallon was present when the human bone fragments from the Manitowoc County quarry were taken out of evidence to be returned to the Halbach family. Tom Fallon assisted Ken Kratz in prosecuting both Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey in 2007, and he was also present when the quarry bones were removed from evidence in 2011. The withheld 2011 report states in CASO page 1114, quote, I, Deputy Hawkins, along with Sergeant Investigator Wiegert, Attorney Thomas Fallon, and Attorney Norman Gahn, removed from evidence all property tag numbers that contained human bone. Attorney Gahn and Attorney Fallon viewed the items under the property tags and, along with Dr. Leslie Eisenberg's report, determined which bones could be returned to the Halbach family, unquote. If the state just left the bones in evidence, or if they alerted Avery of their intentions, we wouldn't be here discussing these new claims. However, as we know, Avery himself was never notified of their intent, and the 2011 report was withheld from his counsel after the deed was done. That same report, along with other pertinent documents, were also withheld from Zellner once she signed on to represent Avery in January 2016. Surprise! Fallon, DOJ Criminal Litigation Unit, was appointed by the former Wisconsin AG, Schimmel, in January 2016 to respond to any motions filed by Stephen Avery's new high-profile attorney, Kathleen Zellner. It was in her first substantive motion for post-conviction scientific testing that Zellner requested access to the pelvic remains, item 8675. Fallon eventually entered into an agreement with Zellner concerning the pelvic remains, even though he full well knew he would be unable to fulfill that agreement, a prime example of negotiating in bad faith. Timeline detailing Assistant Attorney General Fallon's bad faith negotiations with Kathleen Zellner regarding her request for access to the pelvic remains found in the Manitowoc County Quarry. August 2016, Zellner first requested access to the possible human pelvic remains, item 8675, on August 26, 2016, in a motion for post-conviction scientific testing. In her motion, page 23, Zellner said she wanted to, quote, conduct more advanced DNA testing to determine the origin of those bones, unquote. In addition to the pelvic remains, Zellner requested access to the vast majority of the evidence used against Avery during his 2007 trial, including item A, Teresa's RAV4, and item FL, the bullet fragment found in Avery's garage with Teresa's DNA on it. September 2016. In September 2016, Fallon wrote a letter to the circuit court judge informing her that it would likely take him till about October 31 to locate and inventory all items which are subject to defendant's motion. This will definitely come back to bite Fallon in the ass, him specifically asking the court for time to locate and inventory the items of evidence requested by Zellner in her motion for testing. As noted, one of the requested items was the pelvic remains. November. In November, Fallon agreed to permit Zellner and her team access to Teresa's Toyota key, the hood latch swab, and Avery's 1996 blood vial. The stipulation states, quote, all scientific testing set forth by this order will be done at the defendant's expense, unquote. Zellner and Fallon agreed that additional pieces of evidence would be released depending upon the results of these initial tests. March 2017. Zellner had a phone call with Fallon on March 20 to tell him she received the results of the tests conducted on the key and hood latch swab. At this time, Zellner renewed her request for access to item 8675 and item FL, the pelvic and bullet fragments. After the phone call ended, Zellner had her clerk send an email to Fallon in which he was reminded of the discussion they had earlier that day, wherein Zellner renewed her request for access to the pelvis and bullet. Fallon emailed Zellner on March 29. This is the first email we have access to in which Fallon mentions the pelvis, item 8675. Notice he doesn't tell Zellner, quote, we failed to locate the pelvic remains when we created an inventory of the items listed in your motion, unquote. Instead, he seems to imply the state did indeed have the bones, telling Zellner he, quote, would like to know what kind of new high-powered microscope will be used in the re-examination, item 8675, unquote. Fallon also asked Zellner which lab/analyst would conduct the examination of the pelvis. Of course, those questions were pointless to have asked Zellner because the pelvis was long gone by this point. Quote, "Excuse me, Ms. Zellner, but where exactly and what kind of high-powered microscope will you be using to examine the bone fragments I don't have and can't provide to you?" April. On April 4, Zellner emailed Fallon thanking him for his prompt response to her request for the access to the pelvic and bullet fragments. Zellner says, quote, "Regarding the possible human pelvic bones, Dr. Symes would conduct the examination of those bone fragments with his electron microscope, which was constructed in 2013. Additionally, Dr. Symes would make histological, my God, I cannot read these big words today, slides of the bones, which would confirm the origin of these fragments with absolute certainty." Zellner finishes her email by once more thanking Fallon for his cooperation and informs him, quote, "We would like to pick up the bullet fragment and possible human pelvic bone as soon as possible," unquote. On April 14, Zellner emailed Fallon, reminding him of her request, saying, quote, "It has been 10 days since I sent you a letter regarding testing of the bullet fragment and pelvic bones. We are hoping to conduct our scientific testing of these items in the near future. Can you apprise me on the status of these items of evidence?" Unquote. On April 20, Fallon emailed Zellner and told her, although it is his position the pelvic fragments only have, quote, marginal relevance, he is still, quote, inclined to make them available for further examination, unquote. This is yet another example of bad faith negotiating. Fallon telling Zellner he was inclined to let her access the pelvic remains, even though he himself knew it wouldn't be possible. Such a gracious inclination. May. On May 3rd, Fallon emailed Zellner to inform her he just discovered, quote, upon looking into the matter, unquote, that item FL, the bullet fragment, was not at the Madison State Crime Lab as first thought, but was being housed at the Manitowoc County Circuit Court. Fallon told Zellner he confirmed this with the court. Notice Fallon doesn't mention discovering something is amiss with the whereabouts of the pelvis, quote, upon looking into the matter, unquote, as he did with the bullet. Instead, Fallon once more falsely represents to Zellner the pelvis is in state custody, telling her, quote, "We would like to deal with the bullet and the bones at the same time," unquote. Fallon finishes the email by reminding Zellner she agreed to return Teresa's key to the crime lab in 2 days' time, May 5, at which point they both would further discuss the logical and scientific concerns of the release of the bullet and bones. During the May 5 meeting, Zellner and Fallon reached an agreement on the bullet. She would be permitted to examine it with high-powered microscopes, but would not be permitted to alter it in any way or take samples of any kind. Zellner and Fallon began working on a stipulation to present to the circuit court regarding the release of the bullet, which was signed by the judge on May 19. Of course, despite what Fallon said, wanting to release the bones along with the bullet, we know that wasn't going to happen. Zellner was only released item FL, delivered to the Wisconsin Department of Justice on May 23 to Zellner's expert at Microtrace Labs, so he could conduct a microscopic examination of the item while in view of the DOJ agent. Zellner's expert's examination did not reveal any bone particles embedded in the bullet. However, it did reveal an abundance of wood particles embedded in the lead, along with a minuscule amount of red paint, a waxy substance, and a few cotton fibers adhering to the surface of the bullet. Zellner argues wood being embedded in the lead suggests the bullet was energized when it struck a wooden target, and that the lack of bone fragments demonstrates the bullet never went into and out of Teresa's skull. Even if we argue the bullet went through Teresa's body without hitting bone, we still hit a roadblock. the presence of wood in the lead. The bullet would not have enough velocity to go through Teresa's body after being fired into and out of a wooden object, nor would the bullet have enough velocity to go through a wooden object with enough force to embed wood in the lead if said bullet already went into and out of Teresa. The waxy substance is from Teresa's lip chapstick, applied using a cotton swab. This technique of planting DNA left behind 3 or 4 minuscule cotton fibers, readily visible when scanned using an electron microscope. Note the state's 2006 reported method of testing on the bullet does not account for the presence of those cotton fibers. According to Culhane, Big Hair, state's DNA analyst, the bullet was not swabbed in 2006, but was instead put in a wash and then buffered in order to remove any potential DNA for typing. June. On June 7th, Zellner filed her motion for post-conviction relief. Zellner included in the motion the results of her testing on the bullet, key, and hood latch swab, as well as evidence that law enforcement authored false reports during their investigation into Teresa's death. She also raised numerous claims of Brady violations. As well as dozens and dozens of claims of ineffective assistance of counsel. Zellner also specifically alleged that Wiegert, Calumet, planted evidence by swapping swabs to secure a conviction against Avery. What are you going crazy about? I don't see anything out there. July. After her motion was filed and while she waited on a response from the state, Zellner and Fallon continued to negotiate access to additional pieces of evidence. On July 5, 2017, Zellner requested access to Teresa's cranial fragments recovered from Avery's burn pit in order to determine if Teresa was even shot in the head, seeing as how the results of Zellner's examination on the bullet raised doubt about that theory. September. As featured in MAM2, on September 18, Zellner went to meet with Fallon to once more negotiate access to the pelvic remains. During this meeting, Zellner informed Fallon of everything she had uncovered since filing her motion in June: the torture porn and child porn on Bobby's computer, Brady witness who placed RAV4 off the Avery property on November 3 near Bobby Dassey's hunting spot, Toddick's trailer, etc. For whatever reason, this time Zellner was successful in her negotiations. Fallon agreed to let her experts access the pelvic remains to conduct a microscopic examination on them in order to determine if they were human. It was also agreed Zellner's experts would be permitted to examine the entire interior and exterior of the RAV to check for additional forensic evidence. Fallon also agreed Zellner would be given access to the license plates, which, as reported in 2005, had unidentified male DNA on them. On September 18, the September 18 agreement was an incredibly significant development. Testing of the RAV, license plates, and pelvis might have produced undeniable exculpatory results of the variety that freed Avery in 2003. Of course, at this point, after the agreement was made, Fallon knew it was only a matter of time before Zellner exposed his misconduct and bad faith negotiating regarding the quarry bones. October. As fate would have it, Zellner's June 2017 motion was denied by the Circuit Court on October 3. The denial was full of manifest errors and was issued prematurely in violation of Wisconsin Statute 974.06. Nevertheless, the denial successfully prevented Zellner from accessing the pelvis and RAV. Or, more accurately, it prevented Zellner from accessing the RAV and also prevented her from discovering, for the time being, that the quarry bones were not in state custody. Again, as we saw in MAM2, it was on October 6th that Zellner filed a motion for relief from judgment in which she informed the circuit court of the agreement that had been reached between her and the DOJ. The hope was the circuit court judge would reverse her denial so testing would move forward as agreed upon. Zellner also filed a motion to reconsider on October 23, in which she informed the judge of her many embarrassing manifest errors. To be clear, the circuit court judge had the authority to reverse her denial and let the agreed upon testing go forward. But if she did that, Zellner would discover Fallon's fuck up with the bones and would also get access to the RAF. This wasn't about to happen. Zellner's motion for relief from judgment and motion for reconsideration were both denied by the circuit court. Soon after this, the record was transferred to the Court of Appeals. Porn remand. Since the case was first transferred to the Court of Appeals in late 2017, Zellner has won 2 motions for remand, having the record sent back to the circuit court twice, both times allowing her to file an additional motion containing additional claims for relief. The first remand was ordered by the Court of Appeals due to the state's late disclosure to Zellner of a previously withheld discovery item, the results of their 2006 forensic examination of the DASI computer, also known as the Veli CD, which was finally turned over to Zellner on April 17, 2018. The suppressed CD contained a plethora of depraved content Zellner argues could have been used by Buting and Strang during the trial to attack Bobby's credibility by impeaching his testimony and incriminating him as a suspect. Shortly after Zellner received the CD, she filed a motion on May 25 with the Court of Appeals alerting them to the state's decade-late disclosure, which resulted in the first remand being ordered on June 7. Zellner then filed her supplemental motion with the circuit court on July 6. The circuit court denied this motion on September 6, sending the case back to the Court of Appeals. No remand. It was on December 17, 2018, that Zellner filed her second motion for remand with the appeals court. If her request for remand was successful, Zellner wanted to file with the circuit court requesting to have the human bones recovered from the quarry and the possible human pelvis tested with new DNA typing technology known as rapid DNA in order to determine the identity origin of the bones. In their December 28 response to Zellner, the Wisconsin DOJ suggested she was simply wasting time trying to delay an already languishing appeal. If Zellner really wanted to test those bones, the state said, she should dismiss her current appeal, all of her claims raised to date, and file a new 974.06 motion and just focus on the bones. This is yet another example, acting in bad faith, telling the court Zellner could test the bones if she dismissed all of her current claims. Truly disgusting tactics by the state. 1 hour after the state filed their response, the Court of Appeals denied Zellner's second request for remand. Bones remand. It was the above described unsuccessful motion for remand that resulted in a supporter of Avery and fan of Zellner's sending them the Public Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, version of the 2011 CASO report, which is Carol Ann Fitzgerald. This report had been floating around Reddit for years, and it revealed to Zellner the very bone she wanted to test using rapid DNA had long ago been given to the Hallback family. After receiving the withheld report, Zellner filed her third motion for remand on January 24, 2019. In it, she informed the Court of Appeals, quote, After filing Mr. Avery's December 17, 2018 motion for remand, undersigned counsel discovered a previously undisclosed police report, September 20, 2011 report. The state, without notifying Mr. Avery and his attorneys and during the pendency of Mr. Avery's direct appeal, caused material and potentially exculpatory evidence to be transmitted to the Hallback family for its potential destruction by cremation or burial. Because the state violated Wisconsin's preservation of biological evidence statute, Mr. Avery's due process rights were per se violated, unquote. The state responded to Zellner on January 29 and continued to beat that poor dead horse, arguing Zellner's request would result in unnecessary delay in litigation. Quote, as noted previously, the state said, this appeal has been languishing for over a year, unquote. Of course, the state in the reply never offered an explanation for the withheld report, nor did they offer an explanation as to why the bones were released to the Hallback family in the first place. Zellner pointed this out in her February 1, 2019 reply to the state's response. Quote, the state, in its response to Mr. Avery's motion, makes no effort to deny the due process violations Mr. Avery alleges, unquote. Updated evidence ledgers, urgent emails, and errant voicemails. At this point, while awaiting a ruling on her third motion for remand, Zellner discovered there were even more withheld documents concerning the release of the bones that could be obtained via FOIA. Updated evidence ledgers that described item 8675 as only human, contradicting what Kratz said at trial. Zellner correctly guessed this meant the suspected human pelvic fragments were also returned to the Hallback family, along with the cut human bones discovered at those other quarry sites. Recall, it was the suspected human pelvis that was the subject of Zellner's and Fallon's September 2017 agreement. After this new discovery, Zellner, on February 13, sent 2 emails to Fallon marked urgent. The first email was sent at 4:49 a.m., and the second was sent at 9:35 a.m. The second email contained the exact same text as the first, but was enlarged. In the emails, Zellner directly asks Fallon if he has been lying to her for the past 2 years. Quote, Mr. Fallon, you have been representing to us for 2 years that you have the pelvic bone. When I met with you on September 18, 2017, you agreed to the microscopic examination of the pelvic bone to conclusively determine if the bone was human. Now we learn that this pelvic bone may have been returned to the Hallback family in 2011. We are requesting that you notify us immediately about the current status of the pelvic bone 8675. Is it in possession of the state, or was it returned to the Hallback family in 2011 or at any other time? I expect to hear from you immediately concerning this matter. Sincerely, Kathleen Zellner, unquote. Fallon didn't respond to these urgent emails from Zellner. However, the same day Zellner sent the emails, February 13, she received a voicemail from a state attorney who meant to leave a message for Fallon. The attorney who left the errant message, Williams, can be heard saying, quote, hi, Tom. I don't think we should do anything or respond to her at all until we look into the bag and see exactly if the pelvic bones are in there or not. Then we can talk about it after we send a response. Thanks a lot. Bye, unquote. After she listened to the voicemail intended for Fallon, Zellner supplemented her third motion for remand, telling the Court of Appeals, quote, the state is trying to deceive undersigned counsel and this court about the status of the pelvic bone 8675, which was recovered from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. The state has continuously represented to undersigned counsel since 2016 that the state was in possession of the pelvic bone. Because of the new information produced in the previously undisclosed ledger sheets that 8675 was determined to be human, undersigned counsel does not know if prior undisclosed testing has occurred prior to the bones being returned to the Hallback family, unquote. The state chose not to respond to Zellner's supplemental filing. Apparently, they didn't feel like explaining their lies and embarrassing fuck-ups to the Court of Appeals. Luckily, Zellner's third motion for remand was granted on February 25. In their decision and order, the Court of Appeals specifically noted the state had not replied to Zellner's allegations regarding their destruction of biological evidence that was the subject of an agreement for testing. This ruling meant Zellner would once more be permitted to file a supplemental motion with the circuit court containing additional claims for relief. Less than 1 month after the remand, Zellner, on March 11, filed her second supplemental motion with the circuit court. I linked and summarized this motion at the top of the post. State concealed evidence from the jury in 2007, acted in bad faith when they released bones to the Hallbacks in 2011, and engaged in a pattern of deception until caught. The state filed a response to Zellner on March 29, arguing that they didn't violate any laws because they didn't know the biological origin of the bones when they were released to the family. The state even suggested it was possible they gave the Hallbacks animal bones for burial or cremation. Note the state still neglected to offer an explanation for the withheld 2011 report. Also, in the reply, Fallon labeled the release of the bones to the family as inexplicable, which is odd because of the few people who could explain it. Fallon is one of them. He was there that day with Gahn and Wiegert using Eisenberg's report to determine which of the quarry bones were human and could be returned to the family. Inexplicable indeed. Zellner replied to the state on April 11 in order to clear up their misunderstanding of law and address their false claims, such as their claim that Zellner was provided with the withheld 2011 report months before she said she was. Zellner reminded the state when she first requested a FOIA version of the CASO, they failed to send it to her even though she had already paid for it. The withheld report was ultimately provided to her due to the interest of a third party, Zellner said, not the state's integrity. Zellner then expressed her concern to the court that Fallon was still involved in writing the state's responses in the Avery case. Specifically, Zellner said on page 23 of her April 11 response, quote, "It bears noting that Assistant Attorney General Fallon and Special Prosecutor Gahn, both of whom represent the state in this proceeding, were the state attorneys who participated in the return of human bones from the gravel pit to the Hallback family. They are interested party and their bad faith is directly at issue in this case. Their protestations and denials are suspect. This court must discern whether their arguments themselves are made in good faith or in the simple interest of self-preservation," unquote. And that's all, folks. We are now up to date, waiting on the circuit court to decide whether the state's arguments were made in good faith or in bad faith. Note, when the Court of Appeals ordered the first remand, they did actually set a deadline for the issuance of a decision and order by the circuit court, 2 months. But for some reason, the court didn't do so upon granting Zellner a second remand. As such, there is a bit of a lingering fear that the circuit court judge is going to stall for as long as she can now that Zellner has the state by the balls. In my opinion, any delay in a decision from the circuit court should only be interpreted as distress signal from the state. Panic and confusion have set in. They know Zellner can prove they have been acting in bad faith. Zellner knows the state failed to alert Avery's counsel in 2011 before they released biological evidence to the Hallback family. Zellner knows the state withheld the 2011 CASO report from her when she signed on to represent Avery in 2016. Zellner knows and can demonstrate that Fallon repeatedly lied about her being granted access to the remains. This all indicates the state was engaged in an immediate and continuous cover-up beginning the moment the bones were released to the Hallbacks. They didn't want anyone, least of all Kathleen Zellner, to know about their actions. Examining Fallon's self-destructive behavior. Do we even want to? Okay, it's short, so I'll read that because I'm like, oh my God, this is going on forever now. Fallon, for some reason, entered into an agreement regarding the pelvic remains on September 18, 2017, that, if fulfilled, would have exposed the very thing the state had been trying to cover up for years via the withholding of, sorry, got distracted by the email. Of reports. Luckily for Fallon, the circuit court came to his rescue on October 3 with an embarrassing denial full of minor and major errors that, I suppose, served its purpose, preventing Zellner from discovering the state had long ago destroyed the very biological evidence Fallon just told her she could examine. I believe the only reason Fallon finally agreed to let Zellner access the bones, RAV, and license plate all at once was because he knew without a doubt not even one part of the agreement would be fulfilled. Recall when Zellner walked into Fallon's office on September 18, she was armed with powerful tools for negotiation. Zellner revealed to Fallon she knew about the torture, porn, and child porn on Bobby's computer, and also knew about Teresa's RAV being spotted off the Avery property near Bobby's hunting spot. And then wham, after playing hard to get for so long, Fallon suddenly gave up the goods, all the goods. Fallon told Zellner he would grant her access not only to the pelvic remains, but also to the RAV4 and license plates. The theory here is Fallon entered into this extremely significant agreement for testing, not because he was suddenly feeling generous, but because he knew the agreement would never be carried out. He knew Zellner was getting closer, which meant it was time to request a denial from the circuit court judge. Fallon knew a denial would cancel out any agreement he made with Zellner prior to the decision being issued, meaning he could even feign an act of good faith and agree to let Zellner access items of evidence that were no longer in state custody, such as the bones. Fallon appeared to give Zellner what she wanted, but then later urged the judge to issue a denial, a tactic referred to as a silent veto. Of course, for this theory to be accurate, we have to assume the circuit court judge would actually be receptive to the DOJ asking her to issue a denial at their behest. On the other hand, if you don't like my coordination theory with Fallon and the judge, I suppose you could argue Fallon didn't have any master plan, and then he entered into that self-destructive agreement for one reason and one reason only. He is so incompetently corrupt that he was exposing his own cover-up. Whatever the fuck is going on here, it is clear the state's actions, destroying evidence, withholding reports and ledgers, lying to Zellner about testing, indicates they absolutely knew they were acting in bad faith, and now their cover-up has come crashing down. And then you can, then are all the emails. So the March 20th, 2017 email from Zellner's clerk to Fallon. Zellner's clerk reminds Fallon she requested access to item 8675, the pelvis. March 29, email from Fallon to Zellner. Fallon asks Zellner what kind of microscope she plans to examine the pelvis with, where the examination of the pelvis will take place. April 4, Zellner answers Fallon's inquiries concerning the pelvis. Zellner tells Fallon she would like to pick up the pelvis as soon as possible. April 14, Zellner lets Fallon know she has been counting the days since his last response and asks him to apprise her on the status of the pelvis. April 20, Fallon confirms he is still inclined to make the pelvis available to her experts for examination. May 3, Fallon emails Zellner 2 days before they plan to meet to discuss the possible release of the pelvis. Fallon tells Zellner he would like to deal with the bullet and bones at the same time. September 18. Fallon and Zellner reach an agreement regarding the release of the pelvis, even though Fallon knew he wouldn't be able to fulfill the agreement. This agreement was nullified by the circuit court's October 3, 2017 denial, which prevented Zellner from discovering Fallon's bad faith negotiating. February 13, 2019. A little over a year later, Zellner emails Fallon questioning him about her recent discovery that he was present in 2011 when the quarry bones, including the pelvis, were taken out of evidence to be released to the Hallbat family. And then you can click here to see all the screenshots of the emails. So I'm not going to then read the emails because they summarize everything. So the link is posted in this live chat as well as in the group of where you can go to this Reddit thread and read all this for yourself. So basically, she's been asking for this bone. They've been telling her she can have the bone when they knew the whole time that they gave it away years ago. Let me scroll through your comments. And Julie says, and now Fallon goes on sabbatical. What a wussy. Earl says, why hasn't Team Zellner examined the RAV4? Because they won't give it to her. They won't give her access to it. I don't know why they can deny it to her, but they are. Julie says, from how they gave the bones away, how can we trust the RAV is still there? But if Zellner keeps them thinking she believes it's still there and then finds out it's not, it's one more weapon against the state and another bad faith action, right? You can't trust anything because they're corrupt. Natasha says, there was none of Teresa's DNA on the key, correct? No. Nothing of Teresa on the key. There was just Stephen's on there, and Stephen believes they used his slippers. So they wiped the key on his slippers. People replying to each other. Earl says, obvious fucking cover up. Ugh. Yeah. And then Earl says, lower court has to deny, then game on. Mm-hmm. Kitty says, yep, they're dragging this out as long as they possibly can. Julie says, state playing games. Miley says, go Carol Ann. Go to the light, Carol Ann. I can't ever hear Carol Ann and not think of Poltergeist. Natasha says, I think they're the ones causing unnecessary delays. Oh my fucking God. Earl says, just sent a letter to Stephen telling him to not get discouraged if the lower court denied Zellner's filing, that it would be best for him to take it to the higher court. Stephen must be thinking he is up against an immovable brick wall. He needs encouragement. Joy says, and nothing was said about the accidental voicemail that Zellner wasn't supposed to get, right? Oh, and now I'm down to the bottom. Well, that was quick to get through all of that. And I've been on for almost an hour and 40 minutes. So I will end all of this now. Friday, I'm going to remind you all again, on Friday, I'm going to go to that thing that Strang and Buting and Nye Ryder and Drizzen are all doing in Chicago. It's an all-day thing, goes from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So maybe I'll go live when I get home from that. So sometime Friday night, and update you all on how that went. So that should be the next live from me is after that, unless a decision comes in or something major. I shouldn't be live tomorrow. I really have things I need to get done. So that'll be that for now. If you guys ever find anything like this that's interesting on Reddit or wherever, you're free to share the link here in Gossip. we don't want you just copying and pasting. We want the link, so people can go back to where it originated from. So, because, Reddit's got a lot of good stuff in there. It's got a lot of bad too, but that everything does. There's good and bad in everything. So, all right. I am going to go. Been a long, long day. I left. What time did I leave this morning? I left at 7 a.m. this morning to drive down there. And so I was only home like 15 minutes before I got on this live. So now I'm going to go change into comfy clothes and wash my face and veg out on the couch until Jeff gets home from work. So, all right. I'll talk to you all soon. Have a good evening.